1973 года, 7 часов утра. Ну вот сегодня довольно рано проснулся.
Today is the 21st of July, 2023 year, at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Закончился второй рабочий день. Пораньше лег спать.
Well, today I woke up quite early because yesterday the second working day was over and I went to bed early. Somewhere after 10, I fell asleep and woke up very early at about 3 in the morning. I tried to fall asleep, something like sleep does not pull already. Apparently, I have already gained so much, gained what I needed in a dream, restorative energy. And then I decided to go to the bathroom and meditate a little, as I often do. Some thoughts come when you relax in the bathroom like this. You take it there. Meditate like that, you accept such a comfortable state. So today, even after 3 o'clock in the morning, I first read a book by Alice Bailey. I have been rereading all of Alice Bailey's books for the last few months, which I have already read in full in the late 90s. But then I reread them for a while, and once again decided to reread them after I translated the whole Jilazoika. I wanted to see how I would be based on Jilazoika, perceive Alice Bailey's texts.
После того, как он перевел всю гилозойку, захотелось вот уже на основе гилозойки посмотреть, праздника Весак.
Now I am reading Esoteric Psychology Part 2, and have reached the place where the great significance of the Vesak holiday, and the great call is described in order for such significant events to take place, so that the externalization of the hierarchy takes place.
Значительные события, чтобы произошла экстернализация иерархии.
So Christ returned, as he promised, after the Second World War, and here some thoughts arose related to the fact that after the Second World War ended and humanity was given a chance to take a new path, preparatory information was given through Blavatsky, through Alice Bailey, through various teachers of a different direction and different meanings of scale. But a lot of information was given in connection with the advent of the age of Aquarius, in which we are moving from the age of Pisces, and about the situation that has developed on the planet.
И разные значимости, масштабы. Но очень много было информации, было дано в связи с наступлением эпохи Водолея. Ситуация очень напряженная была перед Второй мировой войной. От той ситуации, которая сложилась на планете.
Here the situation was very tense before the Second World War. Everything was already smelling of a hot fight again. On such a scale of the planet very serious, and now the hierarchy of light was given the knowledge that could, on the one hand, prevent the Second World War, and then when it had already begun, and it was already impossible to stop this battle of the forces of light and forces darkness.
Ну а затем, когда уже она началась, и уже невозможно было остановить это сражение сил света и сил тьмы.
Well, the hierarchy of light helped unite all constructive people of good will in order to resist the aggressor, first of all Hitler, and those countries that he made his allies.
Сопротивление агрессору, в первую очередь Гитлеру и тем странам, которые Европы.
These are Italy, Japan, Spain. Here is the conquered part of Europe, and the victory was won in the Second World War, but humanity suffered very heavy suffering. Well, these are the devastating consequences of the war that occurred after the Second World War, but they were colossal. And it all ended with an atomic explosion in Japan, which showed what further world wars can lead to if they do not end, and if lessons are not learned from this major disaster that has befallen humanity.
Уроки все-таки не были выучены. Много позитивного было сделано после Второй мировой войны, но
but the lessons were still not learned. A lot of positive things were done after the Second World War, but nevertheless, the wounds have healed. Those people who suffered the greatest severity associated with military operations have left the incarnation. Veterans of the Great Patriotic War died. They have already begun to forget about what these veterans have passed on to their children, grandchildren, and somehow now everything that was relevant for people after the Second World War has already been realized. They realized how unacceptable such battles of forces of such a global planetary scale are. Well, again, all this was forgotten, and again people came to the point of starting the Third World War, and the situation completely actually repeated itself. We climbed a little higher, but again we returned to the situation on the eve of the Second World War, about which the hierarchy of light wrote and warned, and this situation was described in great detail in Alice Belly's books. And now we are again in the same situation, and, accordingly, the knowledge that was given on the eve of the Second World War has become relevant with renewed vigor. So, in particular, one of the most important information was devoted to the fact that all people of good could somehow unite, but not within the framework of some organization, with some hierarchical structure, with some superiors, who would indicate how and what to do, how to pray, what rituals to perform. Here is the need for such a powerful planetary organization is not required in order for all the forces of goodwill to unite. On the contrary, such organizations contribute to the emergence of some kind of long-term exacerbations and discussions about how to do what, how to pray correctly, how to understand the structure of the world. This is where people constantly quarrel and can't find a common language. Therefore, a number of measures were proposed that would allow all people of good will to unite outside of any official organizations. And one of the most important such means, according to the hierarchy of light, would be the appeal of all the forces of light, all people of goodwill, all representatives of the new group of world servants, so that they regularly, once a year, together utter a call to the forces of light.
Регулярно, раз в год, вместе произносили призыв к силам света.
An appeal that would be directed with a call to return the hierarchy of light to the physical plane, so that the teachers who gave us the most important impulses in the spiritual direction in the past were such great teachers as Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster, Confucius, Plato, Pythagoras. Well, there are a lot of names of those messengers of light who had a huge impact on the evolution of mankind in the spiritual direction. Well, the time has come when they are ready to return not alone, but to all their teams. Here are the great teachers, their students, they are ready to help the evolution of humanity, having already returned to Earth as a friendly team. And for this people of goodwill should, first of all, call them, because it should be a call from humanity that we need such help from our great teachers. And secondly, all the various traditional religions, esoteric and mystical groups, they must somehow coordinate their efforts in order to counteract the forces of darkness that exist on the planet. And one of the most important means for this is a joint appeal to the forces of light. And it is desirable to do this every year on the May full moon. Why this is so is explained, and here I am thinking about why it is still not possible to unite all the forces of light on this very effective and powerful action of the Great One.
На этом таком очень эффективном и мощном действии.
If all the forces of light are on the planet Earth that exists, people of goodwill, ministers of a new group of ministers of the world, believers of various religions, mystics, esotericists, if they all turn to the forces of light of our planet on the same day, who have not yet incarnated on Earth, but are waiting for a call, an appeal for help from people. Now, if we turn to them so that they come and help us in countering the negative processes that exist on the planet, then they will respond to our call. But to do this, we have to appeal together at the same time, at the same hour, every year in the spring, with an appeal to them to return. Such a call and such an appeal will become a huge power. And so I've been thinking about this topic today, and I'll probably finish the introductory word on this. And then I'll edit the video that will be from my audio thoughts on this topic voiced in the bathroom. These are the ones that I was lying meditating on, and well, they will be a little bit like this, not combed, not designed into some kind of holistic, ordered material. But I think the main idea will be brought to my listeners with the help of them, and here are some ideas that came to my mind. I'm going to share with them. And I am finishing my introductory speech on this, and now I will be editing this film. Let's imagine the average reader of Alice Bailey's books. He realized the full significance of these books, imbued with the importance of the Great Call and the fact that all people of goodwill read the Great Call synchronously, together, united on the Vesak holiday, and thereby establish a channel between humanity and the hierarchy of light.
И этим устанавливали канал между человечеством и иерархией света.
So, he realized the importance of this great call and synchronous action of people of goodwill. He begins to try to open the eyes of others to the importance of the call, but it turns out that neither traditional religions nor followers of traditional religions recognize it. For them, esotericism is usually something so wrong, almost satanic. But moreover, not only believers of traditional religions do not recognize it, but also many esotericists, the theosophists, the Roriks, and other less significant groups and movements in the historical direction, even based on the books of Blavatsky, do not recognize the books of Alice Bailey.
Группы и движения в эзотерическом направлении, даже основанные на книгах Блаватской.
It turns out that if he starts offering them to unite all together, reading the Great Call, they will regard it as something that comes from ignorance, from contacts, or almost from the Black Lodge.
То, что исходит от контактеров или чуть ли не от черной луны.
And then, naturally, there will be rejection of the call to unite on the basis of the call. So we need to come up with a form of appeal that would not rely on Alice Bailey's quotes and on the specific text of the Great Appeal. That is, replace this text with some other expressions that would achieve the same goal and meaning, but were not tied to Alice Bailey's books, and did not rely on her authority.
Но не были привязаны к книгам Алисы Бейли и не опирались на ее авторитет.
So that for people of goodwill, the text that will be proposed will be of such a neutral nature. It was acceptable for Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, esotericists, and mystics. For everyone in this call, there would be familiar words. God, hierarchy of light, love, goodness, goodwill, wisdom, knowledge. These are neutral terms. And in these terms, try to express the same ideas in such formulations that would not be related to Alice's texts were. And it could be combined. For those who do not recognize Alice were, they would have synchronously pronounced this call together. And those who recognize Alice were, they would have already read the call itself, which was in Alice's books, yes. And it would be possible to combine both. At the initial stage, it would be more useful than focusing your attention only on Alice's texts were. At least here is both that and that option to read, and then it will be possible to pull up those who, in traditional religions, seem to be imbued with the importance of this single coordination of all the forces of goodwill into a single power. During the full moon of May and other spring full moons. So here it would be possible to achieve an intermediate version of unity, and then pull it up to a single one, based on the texts were. Well, that's the idea. So, the goal has been set, to come up with such variants of the appeal that would unite all believers and even atheists. Into a single force implies that it will be a union of all people of goodwill, no matter what views they hold, atheistic, traditional religions, esoteric, mystical, it does not matter. To find a formulation that would unite them all, well, on the basis of universal values. And then make a video in which it would begin with some initial conditions. These are the conditions under which it is necessary to achieve this goal. And the conditions are as follows. There is this circle with sectors of various believers and non-believers. That is, one sector is atheists, all other sectors are believers. And these believers are divided into huge sectors of traditional religions, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, here are some other, and various mystics, esotericists. Everyone has their own ideas about what is good and what is bad. Here we can further clarify that among these different sectors, there are people with mental polarization, and there is an emotional one. And there will also be slightly different nuances for them, what to focus on. Well, there are fewer mentally paralyzed people, but their impact on the world of thoughts, on the mental world, on their thinking power, is much greater, although there are fewer of them. These are the people of Western civilizations, many of whom go through the study of science and the concept of atheistic scientific. Here, there are a lot more people who believe in traditional religion, but they are less developed and emotionally polarized. But even their power is very important because there are more of them, and in total, even with less mental power. If you combine them all, then the power will be even greater than that of mentally paralyzed people, perhaps. That's why we need to come up with draft options for both and for others for the third. And then it's up to you to figure out how to make another intermediate call instead of this one in the direction of Alice Bailey's call, but which could already be closer to it in meaning. And in such stages, at first, all the forces of goodwill are united in a call of completely neutral content, and with neutral terms. Then it will be possible to include Christ, I will, some other messengers of light, and then approach the call in the Alice Bailey version. Well, these are the kind of videos that could be made.
такое видео можно было бы сделать.
It will also be possible to emphasize such a thesis. The forces of light have three main areas of specialization of the forces of light, which can be formulated as follows. The first direction is to bring it to people, to their minds, to their consciousness, to reach their heads, so that they understand what needs to be done, what is the plan of the hierarchy, where evolution is going, in what direction, how to contribute to this evolution. In other words, it brings the theoretical basis to humanity. It's like a field of knowledge. The second sphere, which is engaged in the fact that it tries to unite all people of goodwill, no matter what views they hold, no matter what nationality they are, wherever, in whatever place of the planet they were born, with all the originality that this place of the planet imposes on them, both in terms of consciousness and social structure and human relationships, traditions. Here in each point of the planet there are its own peculiarities, and people of goodwill of the incarnation are sent to all these places, although egoistic people still prevail in all places of the planet. But the operation hierarchy of light can only work on people of good will to change Jane for the better. It is very difficult to rely on egoists, and it is impossible. That is why the second direction to which the hierarchy of light directs its efforts is how to unite people of goodwill. Well, the most powerful energy of unification is called the word love. Therefore, this is the second direction, how to combine. And finally, the third direction, when people know what to do, united in order to do it, but very often. The theory is not implemented because there are not enough passionate, active people, who are able not just to understand what needs to be done, but also to do what they understood. Here is the distance between the fact that a person has already understood how to behave correctly or how to do something correctly, and do it directly, putting all his efforts. Here is the distance between these two stages, as it were, is very large. Therefore, the third, one of the most important directions of the hierarchy, is to influence people in such a way as to fill them with a powerful will to do what is intended. This is the plan that people have understood, united for the sake of this plan, but it is necessary to take direct action. In order to implement this plan on the physical plane, to translate it from theories, from some utopian projects that seem very difficult to implement, to the direct implementation of these plans. In other words, having believed that this is real, that it can be done, we can start doing concrete things on the scale that a person, a small group, a large group, and all of humanity as a whole, which are also a group, are capable of. Here are all these units, starting with an individual unit and with small group units. Some wholes that already act as a single power, but on a very small scale, in the size of 3, 5 people, 10. And it ends up in larger groups of 100 people, 1,000, 1,000,000, several billion. It can all be a single group too, if their strength is combined. It can all become a single whole, a brotherhood of humanity on planet Earth, a single brotherhood. That's why there are 3 directions. What's the plan? Unite all the people who support this plan and nourish the power of those who decided to implement this plan by teaming up with other like-minded people. Here are the three main directions. There are several other directions. As you know, there are 4 auxiliary ones in addition to the 3 main rays. For them, too, it is possible to outline some options for joint unity and action, but here are the 3 main ones. And in the appeal, it is necessary to emphasize and activate all 3 directions of these, so that they connect with humanity. And humanity does what it should, what corresponds to the plan of the forces of light. Here is such a remark. Well, you can also add that the impulse that served as such a catalyst for my thoughts on the meaning of the Great Call and the holiday of wait was the acquaintance with the group headed by Alexey Galkin. Here is the author of the concept of a holistic system, the Holo-system. Here on the internet, he has a website, a forum, groups of like-minded people, where he voices quite such a large layer of positive ideas based on various mystical and historical teachings.
Пласт позитивных идей на основе различных мистических и эзотерических учений.
His concept synthesizes a very large number of different teachings that other group leaders have not yet been able to synthesize as part of their group activity. That's probably the most important thing that Alexey managed to do, is that he was able to include in this synthesis a reliance on the Orthodox, on all the best that the Orthodox tradition gave Russia. Here he has a very extensive experience of studying Orthodox literature. He constantly visits the most important monasteries of Orthodoxy together with his like-minded people. That's how he formulated the most important synthetic concept, voiced as a Holo-system. Well, it can serve as a basis for a national idea throughout Russia and all Russian-speaking countries that were part of the USSR. All these people of goodwill can be united by the concept formulated by Alexey Galkin. It will not be possible to immediately unite all people of goodwill on this basis, but a very strong foundation can be laid. And there it can be added with some ideas from other people of goodwill, and this will inevitably be done. Here, but as a basis, I really like what Alexey has outlined. And perhaps another very important point of his concept is his video recorded on the topic of geopolitics, which is about the situation in geopolitics that developed at the time of the start of a special military operation in Ukraine.
Которые вот о ситуации геополитики, которая сложилась на момент специальной военной операции на Украине.
That's a very important series of videos he has devoted to postmodernism.
Серия роликов у него посвящена постмодерну.
And in these videos, the idea is expressed that a lot of good things that were achieved during the modern era, those last centuries, when after the Renaissance, a lot of good things were brought to Western civilization, first of all.
Очень много хорошего было привнесено западной цивилизации, в первую очередь.
The mental world and the culture of the whole planet.
И в культуру всей планеты.
There were great painters, great composers, great writers, poets. In general, in all spheres of life, a very big breakthrough was in a positive direction. But then, in the 20th century, especially at the end of the 20th century, and at the beginning of the 21st, this impulse ended and turned into an impulse that can be called the term postmodern. And here's what happened during the postmodern period. Alexey Galkin very clearly, and, in my opinion, he made very correct accents in the way he outlined his concept of vision of what postmodern is. It is also useful to get acquainted with these videos, and they state that culture begins to degrade powerfully, rapidly degrade, at the end of the 20th century and at the beginning of the 21st. And we observe this in art, in all kinds of art, in painting, in music, in architecture, in general, in all manifestations. On television, on the internet, this corrupting postmodern culture, anti-culture, if correctly and accurately expressed, breaks through all the cracks. Alexey also spoke very correctly on this topic, and therefore, I believe, that the correct geopolitical system of views on what the situation on the planet looks like, the correct view of culture, and that it is necessary to correct the situation that develops with the dominance of anti-culture.
И о том, что надо исправлять ту ситуацию, которая складывается с доминированием антикультуры.
The most important role of orthodoxy for Russia, and few esotericists manage to connect it. That's exactly the traditional religions, Islam, Orthodoxy, Buddhism, Judaism, and with esotericism. Alexey did it very powerfully and convincingly. Therefore, as a basis, his concept and a very important contribution he made to the presentation of the healing impulse, which must also be brought into the consciousness of people, so that people do not just strive for something here, but that they are also born in general, and the population of Russia does not die out. That's what you need to understand in order for parents to give birth to healthy children, to be healthy themselves. Their consciousness was filled with the right ideas. All this is present in Alexey Galkin's concept, and moreover, a very successful synthesis turned out on the basis of orthodoxy, but taking into account the new knowledge that is given in esotericism. That's why I think it's possible to use his system as a basic basis. Well, that's it for now. We can also make such a comparison so that it is clearly clear what we are talking about, with the unity that arises in us on the 9th of May, when in all major cities and small towns, and in all places of Russia, everyone takes part in such an action, which is called the March of the Immortal Regiment.
Все желающие принимают участие в таком действии, которое называется «Шествие бессмертного полка».
That is, when people walk in a group along some central avenue or street of the city and carry portraits of their grandfathers, great-grandfathers, fathers who took part in the great patriotic war and achieved victory over fascism.
Которые принимали участие в Великой Отечественной войне и добились победы над фашизмом.
At this moment, people of various beliefs, religious, national, atheistic, scientific, mystical, unite in a single stream.
Религиозных, национальных, атеистических, научных, мистических.
People can have very different ideas and very different hobbies, and they would never unite on anything else in their lives. But when a call came from some initiators of this movement to commit such an action, all these differences were erased in the minds of people, and they came out as a single group.
Сознание людей, и они вышли единой группой.
And that's what united them. Something similar can happen to people of good in relation to the task set by Alice Bailey in the books of Alice Bailey, and which is framed in the form of a holiday of fun and a great call.
Оформлено в виде праздника Vesak и Великого призыва.
This holiday can be called not by the word Vesak, holiday, but for traditional religions it can be called by another term. But it is very important that during the 3 spring full moons, the full moon in Aries, in Taurus, and in Gemini,
Тельце и в Близнецах.
That's so that similar efforts are made to unite all people of goodwill. And the text of the Great Call should be formulated for all people of goodwill on the basis of universal values, but who performed the same task as the formulation of Christ in the books of Alice Bailey, which was voiced. These words can still be replaced with others at the first stage. The followers of Alice Bailey's books will continue to read exactly this formulation, which is given in the Tibetan's books. And all the others, who currently cannot interact with each other on the physical plane as a single team, but they can, like an Immortal Regiment during the May full moon, all together read the Great Call, formulated in the form of neutral terms, which would suit all people of goodwill, regardless of what religion they belong to.
Которые устроили бы всех людей доброй воли, независимо от того, какой они религии принадлежат.
That is, not to emphasize that the main messenger of God is Christ, or Buddha, or Krishna, or Mammon. That's who wants to present what name as a messenger of the forces of light. He can insert it into this great call.
Посланца сил света, тот может и вставить.
But the task will be performed as a single one, that is, to read the call to the forces of light together. Here, during the 3 spring full moons, it will be very important to do this. Well, that's how the information, the last time before the Second World War, was given in Alice Bailey's books the day before. In other words, these are the most important messages about the importance of the Great Call and the Vesak holidays, were given in the 36th, 39th years. And yet, here was a meeting of the heads of European countries in Munich. They tried to negotiate with Hitler how to defuse the situation that had developed by that time, and they allowed Hitler to occupy Czechoslovakia. It was from this moment that the Second World War actually began, but a little later. It is considered the official beginning of the invasion of Poland, but already this meeting of the European heads of European countries with Hitler. It was already the threshold of the beginning of the Second World War. Exactly the same importance and scale of the event took place in Munich, when our President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin spoke again in Munich, together with the heads of all the countries of the most important West and the planet, and where he announced the well-known Munich speech, which stated the need to create several different poles on the planet instead of a unipolar world that imposes its selfish some desires of the rest of the planet.
Который заявил о необходимости создать на планете несколько разных полюсов взамен однополярного мира, который навязывает свои эгоистические какие-то желания всей остальной планете.
And in fact, after that, everything went to those actions that have now been localized in Ukraine in the form of a hot military operation. Here, but the beginning of this was a speech in Munich. The situation repeats exactly the same as it was on the eve of the Second World War. And in the same way, the words that were sent to the readers of the books about the importance of the Vesak holiday and the Great Call became relevant again. Therefore, it is possible to return to them again and try to realize this unity again during the May full moon of all people of goodwill. And how to do it. This is what this video will be edited about today, which I will start after a while.
К которому я вот через некоторое время приступлю.
So, and then, I want to write down Alice Bailey's quotes from the book Historical Psychology Part 2 Volume 2. So comment here on the topic that I voiced today. Now I will open the file and start reading. May is a very important month for all those who, like all true esotericists, are close to the Great White Lodge, since it accounts for the deeply significant Vesak holiday. Some people stress Vesak, but for some reason it's closer to me to do this on the first vowel stress. Well, I'll read it the way I'm used to. Although those who study Sanskrit there, the Indian language, they all claim that this is more correct, but I defend the position that every nation has the right to adapt those words that came to us from foreign languages to such a form that is more convenient and comfortable for it. We don't talk to Chloe on the phone. We talk about ice, or we don't talk to the brain. We speak, or the British do not speak Moscow, they speak to the brain and so on. Well, here I explain why I'm still reading Vesak. This period is always extremely interesting and gives a rare opportunity. But the Vesak holiday of 1936th year was unique, and the Teachers' Lodge was preparing for it for 6 months. Well, half a year counts from the moment of the winter solstice, when the sun moves north. This is considered to be the most important period of the year. And the hierarchy is preparing for these holidays, which are described by Alice Bailey, Easter, Vesak, Ministers of Goodwill in June. That's why the first 6 months of the beginning of the winter solstice are very important. Well, I want to comment that this is such a very important period in nature, when after such a gloomy cold autumn, very short days in December, especially here in the north in St. Petersburg, we have very, very long dark nights. The sun comes out for a very short time, and everything is so gloomy somehow. But after the winter solstice, daylight begins to arrive, and somehow the mood rises. Spring is coming closer and closer. Well, when spring comes there and sunny days become more, and they are longer, it begins at some point when nature wakes up, plants, buds on trees, grass. In May, here we have the flowering of apple trees, cherries, cherry trees, lilacs. Well, with my most favorite such period of the year. Well, by the way, my birthday is in May, and the most important holidays are also connected with the zodiac signs in Aries, in Taurus, and in Gemini. These are the ones that precede the winter, summer solstice, when the sun reaches its maximum. So, well, these full moons are very important, of course, and I will continue to read further. I would also add that the Buddha himself in his high place, and the blessed Lord of Maitreya, known to Christian disciples as Christ, has been in close communication and cooperation with each other since that time, trying to make humanity receptive to the possible outpouring of spiritual power that can stop the current influx of troubles, depression, and uncertainty, and begin the era of peace and culture of the soul. Isn't that an interesting remark? But I have already said in the previous fragment that now we have actually come to the same stage of human development that was observed before the Second World War. There was also an opportunity there, if people of good will showed their best qualities and were able to unite all over the planet. Then their joint efforts could have prevented the Second World War. But unfortunately that didn't happen. And I want to say that now, despite the fact that after the Second World War, people have done quite a lot of positive things and advanced in the spiritual direction, but nevertheless, the remnants of the old life are still firmly holding in their hands to strangle people, and again we are, as it were, ready to start the Third World War. So the situation is almost exactly the same as it was on the eve of the Second World War. And we still need to do what we did not do on the eve of the Second World War. And now I'm going to read a little more on this topic. Here is what Alice Belli writes. In connection with the annual May holidays, I want to point out to you the opportunity to serve and approach the desired goal of establishing peace. Each of us, to the best of his limited powers, can contribute to the planned plan with a capital letter, because this plan is accepted by the divine beings of planet Earth. And therefore, what I have to say takes a different turn, and places the responsibility for the implementation of the plan with a capital letter on Earth, on the shoulders of each and every one of us. So far, the work has been carried out thanks to the strenuous efforts on both sides. First of all, the efforts of the hierarchy with a capital letter. This refers to the great teachers, the hierarchy of light, the divine beings of the planet Earth, to capture the plan with a capital letter in the minds of people and convey the power and understanding necessary for the planned work. And secondly, by the reciprocal efforts of all students and aspiring ones who tried to bring to manifestation what awaits on the subjective side of life. In other words, a certain plan on the subjective side of life in the invisible worlds has already been prepared, but it must be embodied by human hands and feet, as it is said in the Paradise teaching, on the physical plane. And this plan is embodied by people embodied on the physical plane, and not by those who will do everything for us in the subtle world. Here, how does this work manifest itself at the present time? Currently, this is meant on the eve of the Second World War. Planet Earth is currently the center of close attention of the plan coordinators, who work in cooperation with certain types of forces and spiritual entities with a capital letter that do not belong to the ring of our planetary life. In other words, we are talking about the fact that before the Second World War, attention to our planet was attracted not only from the hierarchy of light and divine beings of our planet, but also some powerful divine beings who are even on the ladder of evolution, even higher than our planetary hierarchy, than our light forces. And so they were ready to help our planet, and I'm going to read a little more about this topic now. Can I give you a hint without going into details? Question. Following their intuition, each student can accept or reject it, and then follows the hint itself, which the Tibetan woman gives in this article. At present, the Buddha carries on himself a special function of an interplanetary mediator, and in this capacity, on future May holidays, meaning the May full moons, which every year is one of the most important, well, the most important holiday of the hierarchy of light. He will try to bring into contact with our earthly hierarchy, that is, our divine beings. Those great teachers who are known in history as Christ, Buddha, Krishna, and some other great teachers. That's how, at the present time, the Buddha carries on himself a special function of an interplanetary mediator, and in this capacity, will try to bring into contact with our earthly hierarchy some spiritual beings with a capital letter. They themselves have expressed their willingness to help overcome the current crisis. I remind you once again that this is a crisis on the eve of the Second World War. Help, if the attempt turns out to be successful, will come in the form of an increased influx of spiritual to spiritual energy, of a more powerful and somewhat different quality than all that is pouring into and through our planetary life now. That is, what the planetary hierarchy has been pouring out so far. It even had less power than those extraplanetary spiritual entities were ready to help on the eve of the Second World War. Those aspirants and students who can prepare themselves to realize the increased spiritual responsibility and maintain inner calm and focused esoteric attention can join this influx of spiritual power, which will then allow them to serve the needs of humanity. As transmitters, they will satisfy these needs, and as interpreters, they will increase the ability of a human being to respond and understand. That is, those advanced souls who are representatives of the vanguard of our humanity and embodied on the physical plane have the opportunity to greatly help and contribute to the hierarchy of light to carry out the plans of divine beings who guide the evolution of our planet. And on the one hand, they can be some kind of transformers that lower energy, because all the power of energy cannot be accepted by ordinary people who are still not very purified in spiritual terms, as if they are not very advanced. So they are like a light bulb, you know. There are light bulbs that cannot withstand an increase in the power of the current in the network and burn out. So do people. Now, if there were no such intermediaries between the hierarchy of light and ordinary people, which are the spiritual advanced people of our planet, the disciples of light, that's when people would not be able to accept these energies, but the disciples of light transform this power, pass it through themselves, and lower it a little. And then it can already be perceived by the broader masses of the planet Earth. And on the other hand, it is written here that they can still be interpreters of the plans of divine beings. That is, these ideas that the hierarchy of light is trying to convey to people. They translate into language understandable by their contemporary. And this is, as it were, an interpretation of those plans that have been drawn up for the near future by the forces of light. In order to ensure the transfer of power between the Lord Buddha and the Lord Maitreya, I remind you that Maitreya is in the West, the one who is known as Christ. There is a special exchange of ideas and cooperation. And besides, they undergo the most specific training in order to provide interested spiritual beings with a capital letter, trying to help our planet, meaning non-planetary spiritual beings, with more suitable channels of service. 3 teachers from each of the 7 ray groups of teachers, in turn, are trying to conduct closer cooperation with the 2 great lords, well, with Buddha and Christ, preparing an opportunity for humanity. On the day of the Vesak festival, especially at the hour of the full moon, these 23 spiritual forces unite in a common action, as a group channel of service. The entire hierarchy of teachers is called upon to prepare for the intense holy month, for the May full moon of intensified service. And all the teachers of the 7 rays, regardless of the current work of their own sector, come into close contact and provide direct assistance to the 3 teachers of their ray, acting as ray intermediaries. This is a new and peculiar kind of service, but I will not expand on it, because I will not be understood anyway. In turn, the hierarchy of teachers calls on all active dedicated students, all mentally focused, striving to provide maximum assistance to the strenuous efforts, to increase the receptivity of humanity to the new forces that can be released to exert their beneficial synthesizing action. In the month of May, it is to such intensive cooperation that we are called upon. If both the great masters and the concentrated listening hierarchy manage to carry out what can be considered one of the forms of planetary alignment, and open the necessary channel for the influx of extraplanetary energies, then the disciples of the world and a new group of world servants will have to assume the function of a transmission link and a means of communication between world thinkers and a spiritual group of inner workers. The world thinkers here mean the intelligentsia, those representatives of culture, science, and art, who are trying to make their contribution to help humanity move in a spiritual direction. And those who are on the inner, the spiritual group of inner workers. This means already representatives of the hierarchy of light, who are in the higher subtle worlds. Thus, we have a focused hierarchy with a capital letter, intently listening to a group of 2 lords, 21 chones, and teachers of the 7 rays. We also have world disciples and a new group of world servants, who in turn have been given the opportunity to focus and serve the transmission channels. And in addition, we have an unhappy, confused world of people, ordinary people, passionately waiting for an event that can happen, if the aspiring of the world bring themselves into line with the opportunity provided. In this regard, one esoteric point is interesting. In 1936 and 1937 years, the period of the Vesak holiday on the inner planes was extended to 5 days. The 2 days preceding the holiday itself, and the 2 following days. The most important thing is the hour of the spring, that is, the specific day of the full moon and the exact point of the full moon. The 2 preparatory days are called the days of rejection of detachment. The actual day of the holiday is a day of vigil, and the next 2 are called distribution days. For the hierarchy of teachers, the meaning of these words differs from what they mean for us, and it is useless to reveal their deep meaning. Yes, and it is forbidden. This is already well information that can only be perceived by trained students. In general, they mean 5 days of the most energetic efforts and service, with the rejection of everything that can hinder us as ministers and a channel of spiritual power to benefit. This means that after the long-awaited preparation, dedication, and striving upward in the first 2 days, on the day of the holiday itself, we consider ourselves only receivers or guardians of the amount of incoming spiritual power that we are able to hold. As channels, we must be ready to forget about ourselves in the service of contacting this force, accommodating, and retaining it for the rest of humanity. We should consider the holiday itself a day of silence. I mean inner peace and silent solemnity, which must not be weakened to maintain. Although an external person can serve as a word and expressed interest. A day of service conducted exclusively on esoteric levels, a day of complete forgetfulness of oneself, and remembering only about humanity and its needs. Only 2 thoughts constantly hold our attention during this period: the need of our brethren and the need to create a group channel for the flow of spiritual forces through the body of humanity, under the experienced guidance of selected members of the hierarchy. Remember, no matter who we are, what our position and our environment are, and no matter how isolated and disconnected we feel from those who can share our spiritual vision, nevertheless, each of us on this day, and the periods immediately preceding and following, it is able to work, think and act in accordance with a group formation, functioning as a silent distributor of power. For 2 days before the full moon, we keep the mood of devotion and service, trying to be receptive to what our soul transmits to us, and what makes us useful to the hierarchy. The hierarchy works through groups of souls, and in reality, such group work remains to be seen. And the reality of such group work remains to be seen. The groups, in turn, are in contact with waiting, devoutly listening people, whom they spiritually nourish. On the day of the full moon, we try to stay firmly in the light and do not formulate for ourselves what should happen. We do not expect any results or intangible consequences. In the next 2 days, the focus of our attention steadily shifts from ourselves, from internal subjective plans, to the outside world. And we try to transmit or conduct the amount of spiritual energy that we were able to perceive. This is where our participation in this special area of cooperation ends. This work of the hierarchy is designed for 5 days, which are preceded by a period of the most intensive preparation. Preparation for the opening opportunity begins for the hierarchy exactly at the moment when the sun turns its movement to the north. Well, that is, on the days of the winter solstice. But they do not get tired like human beings, despite all their devotion. An aspiring person is not able to withstand such a long preparation. Well, I didn't sound the intonation like that, but they don't get tired like human beings. That is, if people get tired of preparing for the holiday for 6 months, they cannot withstand such intense preparation. But teachers can withstand it. That is, they do not get tired like human beings. And despite all his devotion, an aspiring person is not able to withstand such a long preparation. That is, people can't. When the great Vladika walked the earth, he told his disciples that successful spiritual healing is impossible without prayer and fasting. Why am I quoting these words? Vesak is a group attempt at inclusive group healing, and the task can be solved through prayer, sanctified desire, enlightened thinking, and energetic aspiration. And the discipline of the physical body is the continuation of a short period of time and with a specific purpose. But what exactly should be achieved at such an important moment as the May full moon? I will state the tasks sequentially in order of their significance, and as clearly and concisely as this complex subject allows. The first one, the release of certain energies capable of having a powerful influence on humanity, which in their release necessarily stimulate the spirit of love, brotherhood, and goodwill on earth. These energies are as undeniable and real as those that science deals with, calling them cosmic rays. I'm talking about really real energies, not emotionally desired abstractions. Second, the fusion of all people of goodwill in the world is a single responsive whole. This is a very important task. At least mentally imagine yourself as part of a single huge whole of all people of goodwill. The third is the call and response of certain great beings with a capital letter, whose work can and will become possible if, as a result of solving the second task, the first one is solved. I remind you that the second task is to merge all people of goodwill into a single whole, and the first one is if they can already receive energy from the hierarchy of light and from many planetary sources. So, this work can and will become possible if, as a result of solving the second problem, the first one is solved. Think about the synthesis of these three tasks. It does not matter at all what to call these life-giving forces with a capital letter. They can be considered vichegirants of God, who can and will cooperate with the spirit of life and love on the planet, by whom we live and move and exist. But what is meant is the planetary logos. Some thinkers consider them archangels of the Most High, whose work became possible thanks to the activity of Christ, and a detachment of his disciples, the true living church. Others consider them the leaders of the planetary hierarchy. The Hylozoics call this a planetary government, and Alice Bailey also uses the term Shambhala. Those behind the evolution of our planet, who rarely take an active part in external world activities, provide wisdom teachers. The Shlayam of wisdom is the hierarchy of light, and intervening only at critical moments like the current one. But no matter what they are called, they are always ready to help if during the May-June full moon there is a sufficiently persistent and convincing call from aspiring students. Note that the hierarchy of light and the planetary government, the divine beings of the planet Earth, can effectively help only if, during the May-June full moon, a sufficiently persistent and convincing call comes from the aspirants and disciples. A call for help in relation to the forces of light. So I move on to the next point of the fourth. In the first, there was the release of certain energies. In the second, there was the merging of all people of goodwill into a single whole. In the third, there was the response of the great beings of the planet Earth. The fourth is the response from the inner side in the form of energetic and purposeful activity, of the hierarchy of teachers of enlightened minds entrusted with the work of managing the world. Reciprocal interaction can be very effective if it can be achieved between the following three groups. That is, now 3 groups will be named on which the effective help of the teachers of light depends. These 3 groups in Alice Belly are separated by the letters A, B, and B dot, so the first group is waiting and is currently concerned about the hierarchy. Concerned because even she is not able to predict how humanity will react and whether it will have the wisdom not to miss the opportunities provided. It is organized and acts under the guidance of the cross, the teacher of all teachers, the mentor of angels and people. Christ is appointed as a direct mediator between the earthly plane and the Buddha, who in turn is a devoted mediator between the entire waiting hierarchy and the responding forces, that is, even higher hierarchical beings. Under the letter B is called a new group of world servants, currently consisting of all the sensitives and devoted servants of the race, whose goal is world peace and the establishment of goodwill on earth as the basis of future life and world expansion. Initially, the group consisted of a handful of accepted students and devoted aspirants, but over the past 10 years, it has opened its doors to all people of goodwill, actively working for real mutual understanding, ready to sacrifice themselves for the good of humanity, and who do not see any barriers, but treat representatives of all different nationalities and religions equally. So the first group is a hierarchy, the second is a new group of world servants, and the third group is the masses of people, who accept the transmitted ideas and respond favorably to the tasks of achieving international understanding, mutual economic assistance, and religious unity. When harmonious relations are established between these 3 groups of thinkers and ministers, and they are able to achieve alignment, even for a moment, at least for a brief moment, to achieve coordination, alignment with each other, then it will be possible to achieve a lot. It will be possible to open the gates of a new life and receive an influx of fresh spiritual forces. This is the group task idea. And then the Tibetan turns to each of us specifically. Can I ask a question now? What is the meaning of the May full moon for you personally? Here for you, those who are listening to this text now, a Tibetan asks you a question. And in fact, it is also relevant in our time, on the eve of the Third World War, which may now be unleashed in a very hot phase. And just as relevant as this appeal was relevant before the Second World War. And then you are now continuing to ask questions. Does it seem important enough to you to give all your strength? Do you believe that on this day of the May full moon, there can really be an outpouring of spiritual energy powerful enough to change the situation in the world, provided that the sons of men take part in it? Do you believe, and are you ready to proceed practically from your belief that on this day the Buddha, together with the cross of the hierarchy of enlightened minds with a capital letter, with the assistance of some thrones, principles, and forces of light, which are the highest correspondents of the forces of darkness. That is, just as the Black Lodge is very powerful, so there are divine beings very powerful, who are much stronger than the Black Lodge. But here they also have a certain hierarchy, and the highest degree of hierarchy is much more powerful than that of the highest hierarchy of the Black Lodge. But they are nevertheless, Black Lies are also strong. So it is said that there is also such a powerful group there, which needs to be fought and resisted, or rather counteracted. At this time, the main thing for you is not to fight the forces of darkness and evil. An ordinary person cannot cope with this. With this, the fight against Black Lies is directly engaged in the hierarchy of light and the planetary government. But people need to awaken interest in the forces of light, mobilizing them and the resources of people of goodwill. and the right orientation in today's world. Do not fight evil, but organize and mobilize good. Support those acting on the side of truth and love, in order to reduce the possibilities of evil. In other words, we can fight evil, but we can cultivate good in ourselves, support all people of goodwill, who stand on the side of truth and love, and by this we will reduce the forces of evil on our planet and counteract them. That is, not by directly fighting them, but by increasing our spiritual power. And then light will pour out from each of us, and together, if we coordinate our efforts, this light will reach such a magnitude that it will dispel the darkness that the Black Lodge planet Earth is trying to impose on the masses, on the broad, on humanity. I'll keep reading. If you have faith in my words, even with a mustard seed, if you have a firm faith in the work of the Spirit of God, and in the divinity of man, then from the moment you receive this information, forget about yourself and devote all your strength to participating in organized cooperation to change the current world situation by multiplying the spirit of love and goodwill. In the month of May, if you want to help the world at this time, there are 3 practical possibilities for this. I'm not talking about personal preparation, which each of you as an individual will have to spend inside yourself, cleansing sacrifice, clear thinking and increasing sensitivity, each of you must persistently desire and achieve independently, in the secret place of your heart. But before the holiday with a capital letter, you need to try to settle all your affairs, in order to then make the most of the opportunities for cooperation that the week of the full moon gives. And trying to convey to your inner circle the importance of the current moment, you must rely on sound judgment, and show real skill in action. But it seems self-evident to me. Well, what I've read now is about what everyone should individually do by themselves. But then Tibetus adds that in addition to this, there are 3 more points, as if keep in mind. I'm talking now about the general tasks that you are able to solve. There are 3 of them. The first one, conduct active explanatory and mobilization work among the friends of aspiring and students of the world, no matter what groups they are in, encouraging them to prepare in their own groups and at their own discretion. Second, to offer participation to everyone who can respond, informing about an unfavorable opportunity, encouraging them to join in a worldwide attempt to reactivate the spirit of goodwill, and invite them to jointly send a great call on the day of the full moon and spring. This refers to the Wait holiday. The workers of each country should do everything possible to increase the number of people using this call with a capital letter, and familiarize the public with the ideals of the new group of world ministers. Those who can be attracted in different countries should be given explanations, helping them to spread the appeal in their own language, and in formulations that will make it acceptable. By the way, when I proposed a draft option for people who do not read Alice Bailey's books, and even treat them negatively, here it is necessary to supplement the great call that was given by Christ after the Second World War, with some options that are suitable for those who have a negative attitude to esotericism, to the books of Alice Bailey. And here is one of the options I gave in today's film. So I repeat, it is necessary to give explanations by helping them to spread the call with a capital letter in their own language. Well, in Russia in Russian, in America in English, in France in French. This is also discussed in the wording that will make it acceptable. Well, in addition to the main call, the great call, which is given in the books of Alice Bailey, you can create alternative versions of the call, at least so that all people of good could voice alternative options together at the same time. the wording that makes it acceptable. And this means that there may be something to correct in the Great Call. But here's one of the options I gave in today's video. And also, by all means, try to organize its simultaneous sending on the day of the May full moon. Well, I also suggested that every 2 hours this text should be mentally imagined that everyone unites on the mental plane and reads exactly at 12, at 14, 16, 18, 20, and 22 hours, every 2 hours this text of the call to read together. This will be a huge power and a huge help to the forces of light. Those who read the call should be persuaded to say it out loud. It is very important to read this text aloud, if there is such an opportunity, in order to endow sounds with real power, and put all the strength of your will into words. It is the invocation of the will to good that is the task of the forces that can help at the present time. It is very important to understand this. And finally, the third point. On the day of the May full moon, arrange as many public meetings as possible. It means that the meetings should take place in the 18 hours that precede and include the time of the full moon. In other words, the full moon has an exact date in astrological reference books. And here are the 18 hours that precede this exact date of the full moon. It is very important to hold various public meetings. Try to communicate, cooperate in good faith, exchange some common ideas that can serve for good. And I read on. It is not necessary to meet at a strictly defined hour. The main thing is to gather as many people as possible at some point during these 18 hours to lay the foundation and help the work that will take place during the full moon. That is, at the exact minute, the exact astronomical point of the full moon. Aspiring ones who succeed in this should try to enter meditation at the agreed time, if possible, in a group formation, so that the energy received and the power vortices formed earlier at public meetings can be used to transfer the weight of the social demands of the world and light to the side of the efforts of the hierarchy of light with a capital letter. The ways of solving these three tasks of organizing a one-time effort in the world in the name of achieving universal peace and cooperation depend on the requirements of time, circumstances, and place in the country and environment. In other words, everyone should take into account the peculiarities of the country in which he lives and adapt these tasks that were announced to the conditions of his country. Representatives of various ministry units from different countries, if you know them and their interests, should be encouraged to cooperate and give them these explanations. It is desirable that universal, ubiquitous, and meaningful use of the Great Call with a capital letter. It is necessary to encourage the general public to do this by all means. It is necessary to use the radio and the press in every possible way. By the way, I will add that in our time, in addition to radio and the press, you can use the internet, some joint sites, forums. Online, you can conduct some streams on YouTube, as many people as possible to unite in this single action, reading the Great Call. And at some point, maybe even on one of the central channels. Here is a call that would be acceptable for representatives of different traditional religions, mystics, esotericists. That's so that the text of this appeal is acceptable to everyone, and then you can even read it on TV. If everyone agrees that on the May full moon, this task will be realized. It is necessary to use the radio and the press in every possible way to communicate with all people of goodwill, even with those who are not enlightened from an occult point of view, not even with those who are aware of the guiding presence of the hierarchy of light and the opportunities that are now provided, thanks to the joint efforts of Buddha and Christ. Let everyone who wants to help think carefully about what they can do and what contribution they can make. Personally, each of you who are listening to me now, that's exactly what you can do and what contribution you can make. Having carefully weighed everything, let them decide what they can sacrifice and how they can use their ordinary, usually selfish personalities in the great pressure of the hierarchy of a new group of world servants and people of goodwill around the world. The barriers separating the people of the nation must be demolished. Tukmira is able to achieve such strength that the necessary restructuring will take place naturally and gently. It is possible to stimulate anew and on a broader scale, the enlightenment of human minds, and the organization of further human efforts to establish brotherhood. Thanks to this quite possible and great integration effort, which can focus during the Vesak holiday, on the day of the May full moon, and intensify during the days preceding the full moon, a real germ of a new century group, a new world, and new ideals can arise. From that age, Aquarians, who are predicted by all historical teachings, mystical and even religion, expect the arrival of a new world. This group will function without having a name and remaining an absolutely fluid and free entity, controlled not by the governing elite, not by some kind of structure with officials there, whether religious there or secular there or some esotericists. No such top leaders are needed in order to do everything that I have read about. And remaining an absolutely current and free education, governed not by the governing elite, but by the principles of conscious cooperation within this spiritual group on the spiritual plane. She will represent a new group of world ministers, which will include representatives of all nations and religions. The hierarchy appeals for help to the disciples and aspirants of the world, who make up a new group of world servants, unequivocally making it clear that there are no people so weak and insignificant that they have absolutely nothing to offer. Everyone is able to do at least something to end the current impasse and help bring about a new era of peace and goodwill. And in our time, this task is just as relevant. In other words, we are now on the verge of the Third World War, and everything that was relevant in relation to the tasks that were before the Second World War is just as relevant today. I continue, although I want to make it clear that we are not working for millennia, but we have two main tasks for the present. First, break the old one and set a new, better rhythm. And in this case, time is a factor of paramount importance. If we manage to delay the crystallization of the inevitable evil and prevent possible disasters, then there will be time for transmutation processes, for the dispersion of what may result in one form or another, and for the activity of a new group of world servants, which is our tool in today's world. And the second is to unite the aspirations of all peoples every May full moon in order to conduct, open, and approve a channel between a new group of world ministers consisting of all genuine disciples, aspirants, and people of truly goodwill, regardless of their nationality or religion, and a waiting hierarchy. When this channel becomes permanent and a sufficiently large number of thinking people realize their functions and capabilities, it will be easier for drivers to influence public consciousness and direct public opinion. In this way, humanity will receive firmer leadership, because the latter will rely on more or less conscious cooperation. Aspiring World is quite capable of creating such a channel. Well, that's where I'll finish reading Alice Bailey. I have not fully quoted this article. I will give under this video links to the materials at the Vesak holidays and even a link to the text that I have read. And I recommend that you still take very carefully to the events that we are going to become participants in. It depends on each of us whether we can help the forces of light to keep the world from the catastrophe of the Third World War, and or mitigate its consequences, not to bring it to atomic explosions that will destroy multi-million cities in Russia, Europe, America, and elsewhere on the planet. Now, if we combine our efforts in the direction of which this video was shot today, we can significantly help the hierarchy overcome the most negative consequences that are possible, and that can destroy our civilization, of which we are so proud.
и которые могут уничтожить нашу цивилизацию, которой мы так гордимся.
This is where I finish the video, stop recording, and suggest that you familiarize yourself with it and carefully review it again and again in order to get involved in this work. That's where I end today's video. See you soon. I hope that our meeting will not be the last.